Hi everyone, this is Darren from SimNation. This is a recap video for WWPF, which is our main draft day sports pro football league here at SimNation. It still is on 2024. It will be on 2024 until the end of the season. If you're interested in our 2025 league, that will be GMPFL. Now, the difference between the two leagues is GMPFL is largely the same as WWPF, except for you can't use customized playbooks. You have to use your coach's playbooks. So it does present a little bit of a different challenge, but it is on 2025. It just switched over. So I don't want WWPF on it because the timing of when it dropped and the timing of where we were would have meant that we would have had to delay the season. And also, WWPF probably doesn't have as much of an appetite for bugs as maybe GMPFL does. So anyways, we are now at week 7. Week 8 will run tomorrow on Tuesday. WWPF runs Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. If you're interested in joining us, um, kind of walk through the standings and a couple quick recaps, or actually we'll just look at the last week and just see what happened, and kind of talk through what that means. So we'll go back to week 7. Um, and I can show scores, I think. So Atlanta versus Chicago. This was Kevin versus Cotton, two coaches who have a pretty good track record out there. Um, Atlanta is a much stronger team right now than I think that Chicago is, but as you can see, Centron was the leading passer, although he really threw quite a few interceptions, and Kevin just overpowered him with the running game, especially in that fourth quarter where he outscored him 24-7. Up until that point, it was 28-13, so still kind of reasonable. Um, so good win for Kevin. Carolina, this is Invisible versus Green Bay, which is DWK. Again, Carolina is one of the best teams in the NFC. They're having a little bit of a down year as they transition away from Zelensky, who was their quarterback. They originally were playing Campbell, but now it looks like they've moved over to Farias. And Farias had a decent game. He didn't really complete the passes well, but in the end, they were able to pull this one out against a pretty good Green Bay team. So you can see Boudreaux rushed for 103 yards, and then of course Farias threw for 291 yards. This stat line's probably not going to sit well with Invisible, so he'll continue to tweak them. LA versus Dallas. So this is Barry versus Templar. LA is one of the better teams in the NFC this season. Dallas is having kind of a down year. And it was close. It went to overtime before LA pulled it out. Kind of curious to just see how that looked. So we'll just look real quickly. Um, so it looks like that with 1 second left, LA managed to kick the tying field goal, um, forced Dallas to punt, and then, of course, they went down and scored the field goal to win the game. So good win for Barry. That definitely helps him, keeps him in a good position against San Francisco, who is just having a really good season so far. Probably just jinxed them. Goldman is no really good quarterback. He's out of Texas, so he had a pretty good game with 305 yards and 1 touchdown. Philadelphia, this is Philadelphia is open, so if you're interested, San Francisco is Stewart, who's one of the probably one of the best all-around coaches in the league. He also plays SNCFL, and he's doing a really good job there as well. Not really even a game. Stewart just shut them down and basically didn't allow them to score a single touchdown. Ford, who's probably arguably one of the best running backs in the league, ran for 175 yards. And then Asa Garcia, who was a former #1 recruit in college, had a pretty good game, although the 2 interceptions probably was a little bit too much. But still a solid win, and they only have one loss on the season, so they're definitely in a really good position for the NFC right now. Arizona's open versus Udo. Udo has been a longtime coach of the Commanders. Udo gets the win. Kind of expected this, but really it was the fourth quarter where his team differentiated. Goodwin had a decent game. He's a dual threat quarterback, but really the story this season has been Colburn. who's a former Washington State running back. 106 yards, one touchdown for the win. Cincinnati versus Houston, we'll just gloss over this. This is really two CPU teams, although I think JP may still be around. But Houston just obliterates Cincinnati. That's Norm. Cincinnati's a CPU team, if you're interested. They have a pretty decent roster. It's just they don't have a really good coach. Bates is having a pretty good season again this year, 30 or 35, 357 yards, four touchdown. Really good win for them. This is Bio Eagle at Cleveland versus CPU at Jacksonville. Kind of sucks for Bio that he lost this one. Really good defensive battle, it looks like. But McCulloch had a really good game, was highly accurate, which is his MO. 27 to 29, and the Jacksonville Jaguars pull out the win. Um, really just were able to score enough points in the first half, and then really it looks like that they were able to keep Cleveland from scoring. Did Cleveland actually even score? No, it's all field goals. Um, so that's one of those games where you kind of wish that you would have got a touchdown and Bio probably would have won. This was supposed to be the battle of undefeateds, but Tennessee lost the previous week. Tennessee's Bama, Pittsburgh is me. And Pittsburgh just kind of took care of business. Now, Pittsburgh will have a problem because a starting quarterback got knocked out of the game. It's okay. Stevens played a lot last year because Pierce, who's the starting quarterback for Pittsburgh, just keeps going down. Lackey had a decent game, not a great game, but Deal had a really good game. So, really good win for Pittsburgh against a quality Tennessee team. And the Steelers will take that. Buffalo Bills versus Oakland. So Buffalo's on CPU. Oakland, of course, is Peter. This one was always going to be like a blowout, and no shock with the score. Johnson had a phenomenal game, 17 to 20 for 381 yards, six touchdowns. I think Leonard is hurt, but Frank is having a decent season. Of course, Bittner is probably one of the best wide receivers in the league. You can see with his overall of 99. Just a great win for Peter over the Bills. Um, San Diego and Miami. So Soa started the season pretty hot, and he's since come back down to earth in the last few weeks, as he just has lost a couple games. If I remember correctly, I think San Diego's Joe Dorman. So as you can see, San Diego edges out Miami. Again, Driscoll had a pretty good season. He was a pretty good quarterback out of Baylor, 22 of 35, 327. And then Miami ran the ball, which Guerrero's had a pretty good season so far as well. But that loss will sting a little bit, and it's a win that San Diego frankly needed. This is New England is Shark, Denver is Prince. This is a battle of two really good coaches, and Denver takes this one. Um, Baker is having a pretty good season. I didn't expect it to be like this much of a blowout, but Shark will adjust. Herrera had a good game with New England, and then of course Prince. He likes to throw the ball, but I think also he had a pretty decent running game going. Not really. He just threw the ball really well. So good win for Denver, who needs to figure out a way to stay up with Oakland and Kansas City. Kansas City and the Jets has failed reality in DP. I will say that this is a battle of two really good quarterbacks between Denham and Compton. Denham is, of course, a quarterback that DP's had a lot of success with. You can see 519 yards, three touchdowns. He bounced around with Oakland. He may have just been with Oakland, but Peter finally let him go, and DP took him. Compton, of course, is just having a really good season. This is a great pickup for Feld reality. 501 yards, four touchdowns. We'll talk about him in a second. He's out of Georgia. He's one of Sharks' best players ever. They'll This is about two CPU teams, Baltimore and Indianapolis. Baltimore's having a really good season as a CPU, and they just continue to win. They only have one loss, and I think that was the Pittsburgh. So as you can see, they may have two actually. 339 yards, one touchdown, one interception. Baltimore's success largely has to do with how Kevin stacked them. Kevin did a really good job with Baltimore. and the CPU is benefiting from it. These are also two CPU teams with New Orleans and Detroit. Detroit's a really good team. Brian moved on from them. New Orleans has a really good quarterback, so if you're interested in those two teams, definitely let us know. You can see what Detroit won this game, 404 yards from McKay, and McDougal, who's a really good running back, had a really strong game as well as Detroit basically just blew out New Orleans. Tampa Bay and Minnesota, another two teams that are on CPU. Minnesota is one of the best teams in the North, so if you want to join the league, I would recommend Minnesota or Baltimore. But as you can see here, Minnesota just got it done on the ground and easily won this one. So if we look ahead to week 8, Carolina versus Chicago. So this is Invisible versus Cotton. Probably Carolina is going to win this one. Invisible is starting to get his feet under him. Atlanta versus Green Bay. DWK versus Kevin. I'm going to go with Atlanta. I think Atlanta wins this one. No slight against DWK. He's a really good coach, and this one can go either way. I'm just going to pick Atlanta. LA will easily handle Philadelphia. I don't think Barry's going to have an issue with Philadelphia. Washington versus Seattle. Seattle is another team that I would be high on. That's on CPU. They used to be coached by Spoof, and they're a really good team. I like Seattle in this one over Washington. I just think there's a bit of too much of a talent differential. Tennessee versus Cincinnati. Bama versus CPU. I like Tennessee in this one. Cleveland versus Indianapolis. I like Bio in this one. I think he'll bounce back from the loss to Jacksonville. Pittsburgh versus Houston. This one could be high scoring, but I like Pittsburgh. They have a pretty solid pass defense, and they should be able to handle Houston, although Bates is going to make it interesting for him. Prince versus in Denver versus Buffalo. This will go to Prince. Denver will win this one by a pretty significant margin. Soa versus Feld. I like Kansas City in this one. I think Compton's just having a great season. This one will be a good matchup with Joe versus DP. I like New York in this one. At some point, New York's going to get going, and once they get going, they should have a pretty good season. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs, though, and I'll talk about that in a second. Detroit versus Tampa Bay. This is two CPU teams. I like Detroit in this one. New York Giants versus Arizona. This is another really good CPU team. They probably have arguably one of the better quarterbacks in the league in Witten. I like New York over Arizona. I like Baltimore over Jacksonville, and then I like Minnesota over New Orleans. If we look at the standings real quick, this will kind of bill out what I was talking about. So in the NFC, Minnesota's just having a great season. We'll see how that stacks out because they lost their starting quarterback in the last game. But DWK is right up there. Cotton is arguably a win or a loss or two away from being out, but we'll see if he can pull it together. Carolina and Atlanta are going back and forth. These two teams are probably going to be the two teams up at near the top in the South. In most seasons, I would say that Atlanta has a good chance, but as you can see when we get to the West, there's a lot of competition now. But we'll see how this one plays out. New York versus nobody really wants to win the East at this point, I think. The only person who's kind of trending towards mathematically being out of it is Dallas, but all three of these teams could still put together something and win this division. Udo, of course, is the only human coach there in those three, so we'll see how that plays out. San Francisco Stewart's having a great season, but he has Barry nipping at his heels as well as the CPU-led Seattle Seahawks. So he'll just have to keep winning to see if he can do it. He has lost one game inside the division. So as we get closer to going back into division play, which is I think the week after next, um, we'll start to see how that pans out. Oakland and Kansas City are going back and forth here. Denver's still in the thick of it as well. Uh, Peter doesn't tend to lose more than 2 games in a season. He has done it before, but it's not normal. But I'm really impressed with the job that Failed Reality's doing with Kansas City. And then, of course, Prince has his team moving pretty well. This one's a little bit of a shocker to me. I didn't expect the standings to look like this, but New England is kind of in the lead here right now. As I mentioned, Miami started strong and then they have tapered off. They beat both New England and New York, so they actually have a better division record than the other two. So uh, even money's still on Shark, but again, if DP gets New York going, he can easily compete. Still think this is going to be Bama and Tennessee. Yeah, he's lost two, but he's lost to two good teams in 2 weeks. Houston's still in the thick of things as well. Over here, it's still a battle between Pittsburgh and Baltimore. They have one more game to play against each other. Um, Pittsburgh, we'll see what happens with Stevens at quarterback. But again, Pittsburgh's offense is predicated around Lackey, who's the running back. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. League leaders, this is kind of what I was talking about. So you have Denham, who's having a superb season, but you also have Adam Johnson up there and Phil Compton. Uh, those three are going to pretty much go at it almost all season. Crutchell's up there, but he's not as good as he was in previous seasons, mostly because Spoof isn't though. Passing touchdowns again, Peter's got Adam Johnson dialed into that offense. Compton is having a really good rookie season. But Adam Johnson, who's I think maybe in his second or third year, is definitely having a really good year. Passing rating again, you can see that Johnson is just having a great game. It's not really Phil. Adam Johnson would be number one, but it'll show Phil Compton. Rushing yards, I mentioned this. Nathan Ford is one of the premier running backs, but Colburn is having a really good season. Garcia has really come on in the last few seasons, so has Boudreaux. Lackey was hurt in one game, and then, of course, he's just struggled with age, with how to continue to be competitive. Timothy Willis is a really good running back as well. And again, when they get into the red zone, he's someone that can really get into the end zone quite easily. You see Ford here as well. Receiving, this is an interesting thing because this is not normal, but you still see Adrian Torres up there. DP normally has two people in the top five. Instead, he has two in the top 10 this year, but you do have Chu and Bittner from Oakland who are benefiting from the season that Johnson's having. And then, of course, you have James Johnson, who's one of the better wide receivers in the league. And then, of course, one of the favorite targets for Compton is Thurman. Receiving touchdowns, no shock here. It's Oakland with Chu and Fan. And then just breezing through, Mackey's having a really good season, so is Cunningham and Willie Bone. All of them should challenge for the tackle lead. Sousa, this is not abnormal. Dustin Sousa is the best defensive end in the league. And then, of course, you can see that Peter likes doing safety blitzes. Perry's challenging, but no one's probably going to catch Sousa. Sousa's just been out of the sport for the last few seasons. And then at cornerback, you can see you have a couple people who are challenged, but the best one right now is on the Minnesota Vikings, which is Devin Scott. You have Richard Irvin, who's with DP's team, and then Harry Albrecht, who is with Kevin's team. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I think if we look at what my predictions were from earlier, it's not really playing out the way I thought it would. I expected Carolina to be like the number one seed. I think I said LA would be like the 2 seed. Stewart's just throwing it all up in the air. And then, of course, Carolina, the one thing I didn't factor in was them having to find a new quarterback after Zelensky. Minnesota's doing really well. Hargrove's had a really good season for them. But I do think that with him hurt, that there's going to be a little bit of a tapering that DWK may be able to get. No one expected the Ravens to be this good this early in the season, so that's a shock. Tennessee's had a really good season. Bama's really done a good job there. The East is a pretty big shock. I would not have expected only one of the teams to have a winning record, but a large part of it has to do with the West. The West is just dominating at this point, with Oakland and Kansas City both doing really good. So that's it for WWPF's recap for this week. We'll sim again tomorrow. I probably won't do another video till the weekend. If you have an interest, the links are in the video. Let us know. We have some good teams open like Minnesota, um, New York, Baltimore, and I really think there's one other one that I'm missing. Detroit, even though the record doesn't show it, are all good teams. Seattle's another good team. So just feel free to join us. We'd love to have you. Have a good night. Thanks.